many difficult decisions does Sean Payton have to make in the coming weeks? How many wide receivers ultimately are going to make this final 53-man roster? And how many spots are available in the running back room in total, whether or not, regardless of if they carry a fullback in Michael Burton? All things to come on today's rundown, but I want to begin with the pass catchers on this Broncos roster and open up the dialogue and the question to A, how deep are the Broncos at wide receiver? B, how many should they carry? And C, if that number is higher than it has been in previous years, what other position group gets the short end of that stick? Because on offense alone, there are multiple position groups, including potentially at quarterback, where you could see more than usual bodies in a room. Sean Payton was asked about the depth that he has at wide receiver, and his response was, I think, quite illuminating. He said, I like it. There'll be some tough decisions. There's a chance a receiver that might be out here today might be on a 53-man roster somewhere else. So it's a good thing. And we're deep at running back. We're just further along. We're so much further along as a roster, and that elevates quite a bit naturally the play of everyone. And I agree with Sean Payton on that front. I do think the Broncos are deeper at wide receiver than they have been in recent years, and that's a testament to the drafting of George Payton and the development of George Payton and Sean Payton throughout the course of the last couple of years. But that's going to come with a little bit of a price in a champagne problem kind of way, because I think a lot of teams would love to carry 5 receivers, right? Some, and maybe more often than not, will go to carry 6 because of the increased prevalence and relevance of the passing game in today's NFL and the different formations and wide receiver sets that you can utilize with that kind of front and depth. And obviously those back-end wide receivers play a lot of special teams. Well, even if the Broncos carry 6, we already know, in theory, who the 6 are going to be. You've got Cortland Sutton as your X and your wide receiver 1. You've got Marvin Mims, who's an all-pro level returner and somebody who was probably your second leading passer or receiver in the passing game in terms of yardage and things last season. You've got Devon Vele, who continues to be and emerge as one of the better 7th-round picks for the Broncos in some time, alongside the likes of Jonathan Cooper and others, but somebody who is going to continue to grow and progress and has the perfect body type to be an outside boundary receiver in the NFL. So that's 3. Then you throw in Troy Franklin, who I think is having an emergence and an explosion during training camp 2025 that is going to put him in the driver's seat, if not in firm contention, for the wide receiver 2 spot on the team this season. And considering that and factoring in where he started after having one of the worst training camps in the wide receiver room last offseason, to the point where we had said if Troy Franklin wasn't a 4th-round pick and somebody that had the draft equity that he had, he may not even make this roster, especially alongside a 7th-round pick from the same class in Devon Vele, who was just markedly better from the jump. That's not how we're talking about Troy Franklin this offseason, and I think in terms of breakout and star player performance, Troy Franklin is on that list of guys to maybe have a Nick Bonito-esque coming out party in 2025, the way we saw the young pass rusher do it in 2025. That brings us up to 4. Well, they just drafted Pat Bryant in the 3rd round. That's a player who's going to make the roster and somebody who in training camp and even in flashes during the preseason has shown the capacity and the capability to be a playmaker in Sean Payton's offense with Bo Nix at the helm. And then you factor in this guy named Trent Sherfield Sr., who was brought in free agency, and during the initial aftermath of the signing, it was labeled by many as, well, hey, this is not going to be their wide receiver 2. This is not the answer at that position. He is a special teams veteran and somebody who can be a core 4 player in that aspect to replace the likes of Traymon Smith, who the Broncos let go in free agency. And that was kind of how he was labeled and looked at as, hey, nothing to see here, no big deal, whoop-de-doo. Well, I have seen with my own eyes over the course of training camp thus far and in the preseason, Trent Sherfield Sr. is a hell of a good wide receiver. Is he a top level elite wide receiver that we're going to be talking about as a fantasy relevant player or somebody that's going to make or break games for the Denver Broncos as a pass catcher? No. But I think the guy's going to catch more balls this year than people think. And I think that what he's put on the practice field and on tape thus far in the offseason has proven to be more than a special teams replacement and a nothing to see here kind of guy. And given more value behind the number that they're paying him, which is not all that much. And Trent Sherfield, in my opinion, is going to make this roster too. So that brings you to 6. So even if the Broncos go out of their way to bring in 6 wide receivers to the 53-man roster and probably have to shave at least one spot away from another position group, it feels like we already know who the 6 are. And then you get to other guys who are practice squad level candidates and guys who are not going to probably have the best chance to make the roster, but still go out there and make plays. The likes of a Kyrie Rowan, who you can always tell with the big fro-like hair coming out of the back of his helmet, number 39. He's out there making plays in practice and in training camp all off season thus far. And I will be curious, now that we know what we know about Sean Payton's plan for this game against the Arizona Cardinals, if we don't see a Trent Sherfield-like moment for a guy like Kyrie Rowan in this upcoming weekend's game. Another guy who just not only pops on the field when you're just looking at it from an eye test perspective, but somebody who, when you watch him move and you see them making plays in practice, Joaquin Davis, he looks like, just physically speaking, so don't come at me in my mentions, he looks like a Demaryius Thomas-like build out there. He has, it was talked about and it was reported when he was going through his pre-draft process and things like that, from a measurables and a metrics perspective, from vertical jump to long jump to shuttle times and 40 times and things like that. He pops off the page the way that a Calvin Johnson popped off the page. And that's not to say that he is going to be either one of those incredible NFL wide receivers in Demaryius Thomas or Megatron. But the physical presence is there. The athletic ability is there. And now it's just going to come down to the developmental adjustment to the NFL level and whether or not he can catch on in that regard. But Joaquin Davis, man, is another receiver in this room right now that legitimately could be one of the guys that Sean Payton was talking about in that quote where he says, some of these guys that don't make our roster could be on 53s for another team in the NFL. I think that Joaquin Davis is a guy like that who could make plays for the Broncos, but because of the depth and the crowded nature of the wide receiver room that we already have, he just may not get the chance. And that is kind of crazy to say for a team that we don't think truly has an identified, clear-cut number 2 wide receiver. I just said that with pretty confident ability, I think I can name all 6 wide receivers that will make the Broncos roster, and I do think it'll be 6. And yet we don't 100% know who's going to be the number 2. So that's kind of like a champagne problem for the Denver Broncos, in that they seem to have a lot of depth and potential playmakers, but we just don't know who's going to emerge as the number 2 or the secondary option in the receiver room behind Courtland Sutton. Maybe it'll be Evan Ingram at the tight end position, but if we limit it to just wide receivers, they've got a lot of depth, and there is going to be a tough cut or two and tough decision or two to make in that room. If they carry 6 wide receivers on the roster, there's almost no chance that there's not going to be an accompanying cut in a tough sense in nature in the running back room. And we have talked about that at length over the course of this offseason, mainly because the run game and the running back room from the 2024 season just was flat out not good enough in virtually every metric. Without Bo Nix's legs and his ability to extend drives with his feet and to produce yardage in the run game as a rookie quarterback, if you take that away, this was maybe the worst running back room in the NFL. And I don't care if they ranked last in yards or yards per carry or whatever. What your eyes should tell you sometimes supersedes what the paper and the box score says. And this running back room was an example of that for the Broncos in 2024. Javonte Williams is no longer here. He is a Dallas Cowboy. He was their big replacement for Rico Dowdle. I say big with air quotes. And the air quotes come because of the fact that by Pro Football Focus's metrics and others' rankings nationally around the league, Javonte Williams is already projected to be the 32nd or at least bottom 3 in the running backs in the NFL heading into 2025 among starters. So out of 32, he's looking at maybe 30th and at worst 32nd by a lot of metrics. So that's no longer a Broncos problem. And then you've got Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin, who were both given opportunities last season to try to grab the reins and the starting role in the Broncos offense in 2024, and both failed miserably. Did both have flashes and opportunities to show what they can put on tape and on the field on Sundays? Yes. And there were moments where that came through, but the consistency was so not where it needed to be. It just wasn't. And there's no reason to expect that that would change dramatically in 2025, which is why they go out and draft RJ Harvey and bring in J.K. Dobbins during mandatory minicamp to be your 1-2 punch. And now the two guys from last year who are remaining are basically in a dogfight for the RB3 spot in a room where they may only carry 3 bodies. And a lot of that hinges on Michael Burton, the fullback, and whether or not a roster spot is used on him. And we know Sean Payton at times has shown he likes his fullbacks as a part of his offensive formations and schemes. And then in the last couple of weeks, and I think there was evidence of it during training camp leading up to the joint practice in Santa Clara, it showed itself during the 49ers preseason game and has continued to show itself this past week with the training camp practices leading into and during the joint practice here at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit with the Arizona Cardinals. And that is a scenario where neither guy remaining from the 2024 trio makes this roster in 2025 because of the emergence of a guy like Tyler Bidet. He is somebody that showed some promise and some prowess in 2024, dealt with injury early on in the season, missed the majority of the season, but then is activated again late and gets the jersey in the playoff game against Buffalo in the wild card round over Audric Estime. Carrying it over into the 2025 offseason, Sean Payton has been very vocal in a almost exclusively positive way about Tyler Bidet. There has not been a lot of reported criticism from the coaching staff or anyone on the Broncos about Tyler Bidet. He shows similar speed and burst ability to a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin, which that's Jaleel's calling card and his skill set and argument to be the third running back on this roster. He's a change of pace back that offers something that RJ and JK maybe don't to that degree, and he doesn't need a lot of carries like Audric Estime to get it going. Well, Tyler Bidet presents similar opportunity for that. But Tyler Bidet also, as Sean Payton has gone out of his way to tell us, is an excellent pass protector. So you've got pass protection, you've got similar change of pace back skill set, he's capable in the receiving game, and he has a clearly defined significant role on special teams as the personal protector, where he has been running pretty significantly with the ones for a good chunk of time. And as former NFL running back Philip Lindsay has often said during this offseason, the personal protector might not be a position that seems like much from a fan perspective, but from a roster construction perspective, it's an important position that factors into the special team game. And if somebody is clearly far and away the right choice at that position, it breaks a lot of ties when it comes to making this roster. But there is an opportunity, depending on how they want to slice and dice this final 53, for them to keep 4 running backs on the roster. Sean Payton was asked about that in his most recent media availability, and he said, we talk about the third quarterback, the fourth tailback. We talk about, do you get to the game with 6 receivers, and special teams factor in quite a bit. Because ultimately, I've said this, the right 53 is so important. So that doesn't mean we have to consistently follow the model of what we've always done. Sean clearly hinting there at some opportunities that they have to potentially be creative, to buck the norm and the trend. And if there's another thing that we feel confident that Sean Payton feels, it's that he's a little bit better about this than a lot of his other cohorts and contemporaries. He went as so far as to say that during the 2024 offseason, leading into free agency and the draft. And by and large, looked like a lot of the moves that they made would, in Sean Payton's mind, back up the talk and walk the walk that he laid out. So I have no doubt that Sean Payton feels that way, and he and George Payton have created such a symbiotic relationship together in the way that they seem to be able to communicate with each other. George's ability to get Sean what he thinks that he wants based on the vision that he has, and Sean's ability to then turn around and maximize it to the degree that he can. So far, in Sean's 2 full seasons going into number 3, it seems to have worked. And while I think the idea of keeping 4 running backs is possible, it just doesn't seem likely. And I do think that the cases that have been made by each guy have started to separate themselves. I have ultimately come to the conclusion that I just think Tyler Bidet is going to make this football team. And whether it comes as the RB3 at the sacrifice or the detriment to a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin and or Audric Estime, or even if they carry a 4th running back and decide to maybe cut Michael Burton off of the initial 53, get him back on the practice squad and elevate him a handful of times throughout the year, the way that we saw Sean do with little Jordan Humphrey at times during his first couple of seasons. Maybe that allows for Tyler Bidet and RB4 to make the roster. But if it only comes down to 3, I think Tyler Bidet is the 3rd, and that means some tough cuts for guys like Jaleel McLaughlin, who was somebody that Sean admitted he had to change his whole offseason roster planning around because they thought Jaleel was going to be able to slide through the practice squad and then be able to come back throughout the season without being picked up by another team. And that clearly wasn't going to be the case because he went off for 100+ all-purpose yards in the preseason and flashed on tape to the degree that other teams started watching. And then you have Audric Estime, who is a draft pick from just a year ago where there was a clear vision that just hasn't materialized just yet. So I do think that tough decisions and cuts are coming in the running back room. And I am now of the mind that I just don't think Tyler Bidet is going to be on the wrong side of it. I think he's going to be the reason that tough decisions are made for some familiar faces from last season. So when you're looking at it all encompassing in the wide receiver room, you've got probably 6 wide receivers that I think will make the roster. And I think we can name all 6, which puts the Broncos in a position where they have a lot of depth. They have a lot of quality options that can and should make plays on Sunday in Bo Nix's offense under Sean Payton. And then they've even got guys underneath that legitimately may make 53-man rosters during the course of the 2025 season elsewhere outside of Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. And that is, again, intriguing because we still don't know who, in effect, the wide receiver 2 is going to be. Will it be Marvin Mims, who by production kind of took that role last season? Will it be Devon Vele as he continues to emerge but seems to be struggling of late with some lower body issues in his knee and his legs? Will it be Troy Franklin, who I have gone on record to say has kind of emerged as not even the dark horse wide receiver 2 candidate for me at this point? He feels like he's more close to the driver's seat than he is to being the guy from the rear who could make a surprise jump. And then you've got Pat Bryant and how much he factors in during his rookie season. And that pesky Trent Sherfield Sr., who I think is going to make more plays and contribute to a more significant degree in the offense than he was originally labeled as the special teams replacement for Traymon Smith and somebody who is going to be mainly regarded in that aspect. I want to make sure I get to some of your comments. I can see them piling up all along the side here. Always love interacting with you and all of the viewers and listeners on the show across all of our social media platforms. It's one of my favorite things about doing this show. And anytime I can see things popping and buzzing off into the corner, it means that all of you are either as excited, frustrated, or whatever as I am about all of this stuff. From Donald, the depth is solid. Agreed, you're going to lose some talent. It's just, listen, again, is it a champagne problem? Yeah, of course. But it is still something that makes for tough decisions and conversations over there at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. Because if you make the wrong one and you leave a guy off the 53 who then joins another 53 and does well, which Sean Payton spoke about as well, talking about the fear of letting a guy go and watching him succeed elsewhere. That's a very real thing. And for a team like the Broncos, who have taken a rebuild year, microwaved it with the surprising upcoming and rising of Bo Nix in his rookie year, to now we're no longer in a rebuild. We're at most in a retool for a team that made the postseason and now has to see how far they can stretch and maximize a rookie contract at the quarterback position to try to win a championship. So for a team whose aspirations have flipped on a head just like that, a lot of the margin for error starts to slip away, and a lot of these decisions come under much bigger of a microscope. Pat Bryant is my fourth wide receiver behind Courtland Sutton, Marvin Mims, and Troy Franklin, with Trent Sherfield Sr. as my fifth and Devon Vele as my sixth. See, I don't think Devon Vele, first of all, those are all the names that I think we're talking about, like the six that I named off. Those are all the sixth. So the order from there kind of comes into question, and I think that Pat Bryant being fourth as a rookie in the third round, that's probably a reasonable projection for him. Marvin Mims was the wide receiver 2 by production and yardage and things like that last season. Although Javonte Williams was the second leading receiver by receptions to me, which is crazy. But I think that Marvin Mims' role is going to be interesting to watch because with the arrival of Evan Ingram, I kind of pictured Evan Ingram taking the place of a lot of what Marvin Mims did last year, especially when they moved him in line and inside as like the baby Joker or the Joker by force. And that was going to be free Marvin Mims up to more of a traditional, maybe wide receiver 3 type of role. But that hasn't been as much the case. In fact, the way that I've seen them line up Marvin Mims, to your point, Michael, during training camp has been more of that outside boundary receiver opposite Courtland Sutton and opting to use Troy Franklin inside and in line and in the slot, sometimes coupling Troy Franklin and Courtland Sutton up as a pairing in certain wide receiver sets and running stunting routes off of each other, complementary routes off of each other in a way that I thought they would use Marvin Mims. So we may not learn 100% about what the vision is during this preseason because we're going to get very limited action from any of the starters in this upcoming game, and then a very minimal sample size in the third preseason game against New Orleans. But I will be curious in the first couple of weeks of the season how the pecking order in the wide receiver room shakes out. At the beginning, to me, I felt very confident that Devon Vele, because of his body type and the way that he continued to just stack week after week after week of making plays. Zach By on our station calling him one-a-day Vele, like the multivitamin, because it was just every game and every opportunity. He just had at least one play that made you go, wow, look at that guy, number 17. That's who I thought would be the wide receiver 2 to start the season, but I feel more confident because of the emergence of Troy Franklin and the presence that he's been able to make and put out there during training camp and during these preseason games. He feels to me more in the driver's seat, coinciding with some injury issues and maybe a little bit of a step back by force of nature for Devon Vele. And we will see how it kind of shakes out from there. But yeah, Pat Bryant being the wide receiver 4 to me seems about fair. I'm ready to move on from Estime and McLaughlin. Jags, just guys. Listen, they did not do enough to maximize the opportunities that they were given in 2024 and really solidify a role within that running back room. And when that happens, you get the response that the Broncos made. They go out and they bring in J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. They clearly felt that it was lacking in that regard. And now they don't even have the opportunity to be the 2-punch like they did last year, where they have a solid one, where Javonte was clearly that, in their mind, solid, again, maybe in air quotes. And then you're trying to be the secondary guy. They're not trying to be Batman or Robin now. They're trying to be Alfred. They're just trying to be connected to the superhero in some way and offer some semblance of production and role that can't be replicated by several other guys, hinting toward the fact that they may be closer to the definition there that you laid out as Jags than as special impact contributors and guys who you just can't move on from when you're cutting down to a final 53-man roster. Watson does everything better than McLaughlin. Better pass catcher, more explosive, faster, better at breaking tackles, better blocker. Blake Watson is kind of an intriguing candidate, but I will say this, to your point though there, Blake Watson has had a little bit of a rough week. He had a couple of fumbles. He hasn't necessarily made the most of all of his showings from preseason games to the joint practices and the practices in between. He's dropped some balls. He's had a couple of fumbles. And I think that when you say Blake Watson does everything better than Jaleel McLaughlin, I think the same could be said about Tyler Bidet, and yet he seems to have carved out a bigger role on special teams and in other areas. So while I'm not even necessarily going to be apt to disagree with you that Blake Watson at a minimum doesn't do enough things as good as or better than Jaleel McLaughlin to make it a conversation, I just think Tyler Bidet is above both guys, in my opinion. And I think that's going to manifest itself on this final 53-man roster. Last year, all the NFL teams wanted to pick up Blake Watson, and that is why the Broncos had to put him on, and the Broncos called up for 3 NFL games. Yeah, that's going to be the case with several of these guys this season. And they're only going to be able to work that magic and manifest it with so many. So if it's a situation where Tyler Bidet makes the 53, they carry 3 backs in JK, RJ, and Bidet, and then Michael Burton being the 4th, fullback in that room, and you say goodbye to both Jaleel and Audric, and you try to either pick between Jaleel and Blake Watson to be a guy that you call up a handful of times throughout the year to keep him at bay from other teams that may want him, sure. And I think you're going to have situations where you could see that in the wide receiver room. You may see that in the cornerback room and the defensive backs where there's a lot of depth. Shoot, you could see it in some aspects in the tight end room because Evan Ingram's going to slide somebody out from last year. And then you've got other talented guys and developmental guys who at a minimum might be able to provide exactly what you were getting from the Adam Troutmans, the Nate Atkins, and the Lucas Krolls. I think of like a Caden Priestcorn in that regard, number 86, who I think has made more plays than he maybe gets credit for and kind of pops off the practice field at times during their various team periods. So yeah, no, the way that Blake Watson was treated last year could carry over again into this year, but I also think there's going to be several other guys who are in the same position that Blake Watson was in last year that didn't have to deal with in 2024. Let's go with one more here. I can see it here. Who do you think will be the tight end 2 in week 1? That's a good question. I mean, Evan Ingram's obviously your unquestioned tight end 1. I know that Sean Payton really likes Adam Troutman. I think that he's had a significant vision for a guy like Nate Atkins, who could also maybe play some fullback-like or non-traditional tight end kind of responsibilities. And then Lucas Kroll, who Cecil Lammey, infamously in the eyes of Sean Payton said is the best player, on the team or one of the best players on the team at that point in time. One of those guys is getting bumped out, whether it's in week 1 or over the gradual course of a season. My gut would tell me that it's probably Adam Troutman. Adam Troutman and Nate Atkins are the 2 names I'm bouncing between. I don't think either guy gives you an insane case to be the second tight end, because I don't think there was an insane case to be the first tight end between any of them last year. It was kind of a collection of not Jags, but kind of we're making do with what we had. But I think Adam Troutman showed enough ability as a receiver to stand out in that room amongst his contemporaries, and I think he's done fine enough, and I think Sean Payton is satisfied enough with his blocking capability to probably solidify Adam Troutman as the tight end 2 in week 1. That'll be my guess. We will continue to monitor it all as we've got about a week or so left in the official preseason. We've got the Cardinals game coming up this weekend, and then the final preseason game where we will see just a splash again of the starters for the Broncos, and whether that's Sean Payton resting after 2 consecutive weeks of joint practice or also conveniently him being able to bring his starters to his former home in New Orleans where he can try to put on the best show. One thing is for sure, we are going to be locked in here at Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan on it all. Nobody does football season like Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan on the air with Stokely and Evans with Mark Schlereth, Dover and Cecil, The Drive with Zach By and Philip Lindsay. We've got Denver Sports tonight. You've got DenverSports.com, which is undisputed, unchallenged, unequivocal, whatever WWE intro you need to assign to it, the number one destination online for written and video content about your local teams here in Denver. It is, if you haven't checked it out, I strongly encourage you to just take a minute. It'll take more than a minute, so take a few minutes. Go to www.denversports.com and just glance at from the written content by the likes of Will Peterson, Jake Shapiro, Trent Finnegan, James Marilat, Cecil Lammy, Andrew Mason, our senior Broncos writer, to the video content from the likes of Orange and Blue Today, the shows like this, like The Rundown, Denver Sports Daily, all of the clips from our radio shows repurposed digitally for you to be able to watch and follow along, just like we have the podcast. It is such a wealth of content, knowledge, information, opinions, humor, and entertainment that is available to you right at your fingertips, right on your smartphone, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And it is my first and go-to destination every morning when I want to read up on all things Broncos, Nuggets, Avalanche, even the occasional update on the Rockies and how they're trending as to potentially become the worst team in Major League Baseball history. From the Buffs to the Rams, as we are a huge and proud partner with the CSU Rams. We are Rambassadors. All of it is there for you. And then we have it all on our social media channels, like many of you I know are viewing it here today. So like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, X, Instagram, TikTok, anywhere that you want to consume sports and media content, we have it available there for you. So like and subscribe, give us a follow. Give me all the hot takes and sports opinions after Saturday's game, this weekend's game against the Cardinals, and we'll be back to react to it all on Monday.
I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the work.